It's Sunday, February 1st, and we've got a major show lined up today. President Trump is announcing the launch of the Republican New Deal, saying it's officially underway, echoing Franklin Delano Roosevelt's 1933 New Deal, which, as we all know, ushered in America's welfare system. The Trump administration is now turning that framework upside down, completely reshaping it, and doing it quietly out of public view. While everyone is focused on the Epstein files, Minneapolis, and Iran, this enormous story is being overlooked. Let's begin here.
If congressional Democrats had their way, Americans would right now be facing the largest tax hike ever. Their proposal was to raise taxes very substantially. And our proposal, which is in the great, big, beautiful New Deal, it's a New Deal in its own way. It's a Republican version of the New Deal. Right behind you is a nice picture of FDR. This is a much better deal than the FDR deal.
May have been the single most consequential day of Trump's second term. He nominated Kevin Worsh to lead the Federal Reserve, something the legacy media largely failed to grasp, with many headlines treating it as a reassuring development. Thank goodness he didn't choose Kevin Hassad or another Trump loyalist. Some even linked the drop in precious metals to Worsh's nomination, missing the larger reality unfolding. CNBC was one of the few outlets that seemed to understand what Worsh is positioned to do, writing that Kevin Worsh is calling for regime change at the Fed and a partnership with the U.S. Treasury. Yes, regime change at the Fed and a new partnership with Treasury. That second point is the key. Ladies and gentlemen, we are heading toward the biggest wealth transfer since 2020, since COVID, something that was supposed to begin 8 months ago, back in April on Liberation Day. But the Fed, Jerome Powell, blocked it, refusing to cut rates and refusing to cooperate with Scott Bessent at Treasury. The Federal Reserve is essentially like a governor on a car, limiting how fast it can go. That's what central banking does. It pulls power away from the people and concentrates it in the hands of a centralized elite. President Trump understands this. He laid out what they've been doing during last week's cabinet meeting when he said the following: watch.
With the help of the Fed, we could hit numbers that have never been hit before. We could hit 8, 9, 10. There's no reason why not. And, I talk about, if you go back 20 years, 25 years, I'm old enough to remember, when we had good news, when you announced good news, the stock market went up. You announced anything good, the stock market went up. You announced bad, the stock market went up. And that's the way it should be. But now it's, over the last 15 or so years, if you announce good news, that means they're going to raise interest rates because they want to kill it. So you can never really be that successful because you announce all record numbers, great, because they're afraid of inflation. But growth doesn't have to have any impact on inflation. It can make inflation go down in many cases. So, and you've seen that with us. I mean, we're growing at a much faster rate than anybody thought was possible. We have very controllable inflation. With Biden, we were getting killed, and we had the worst inflation in 48 years in history, in the history of our country. And that's with going down. So growth is a great thing. It doesn't mean inflation. And I want to go back to a system where when we announce good news, they say that's great. We can lower interest rates instead of raise interest rates. And by the way, if inflation comes, we'll take care of it when it comes.
And this isn't just about interest rates. This is about returning to the original economic model America was founded on, the one that built the country into what it is today. We heard Jameson Greer lay out this plan last week before the global elite at Davos. Hardly anyone even noticed the speech. Most attention went to Nuome's knee pads, but Greer offered a preview, a glimpse of what's coming. Watch.
1991, America's first Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton, delivered something called the Report on Manufactures to Congress. In that report, Hamilton articulated a plan for the United States to shake off its economic dependency on the British Empire. In that report, Hamilton argued for a strong economic policy that would allow America to become an industrial power. He called for a combination of tariffs and subsidies to incentivize industrialization. Hamilton believed that such measures were necessary to promote the development of industries, like textiles at the time, that needed protection from dominant foreign producers to develop the scale that would allow them to supply U.S. needs and also be globally competitive. This vision, as I will discuss, laid the foundation for American and even global prosperity in the 19th and 20th centuries. Hamilton immediately shifted from words to action. He created something called the Society for Establishing Useful Manufactures, and he founded the city of Paterson, New Jersey, to sustain this. It was a government-backed industrial organization, and it made large investments in textile infrastructure and soon blossomed into a massive and durable industry. This growth continued unabated for about 2 centuries, and by the 1890s, nearly half of all silk in the United States was processed in this tiny city of less than 9 square miles. Now, what's interesting is that the manufacturing ecosystem that emerged in Paterson made it a hub of activity far beyond textiles. New factories kept springing up in the city, making rail cars, pipelines, and weather balloons. A prototype submarine was developed in Paterson, New Jersey in the 19th century. And by the 20th century, Paterson had become an aerospace hub.
So the Republican New Deal, what is it and how is it supposed to work? It's the Trump economic model. It focuses on workers, production, and Main Street. Reshoring American manufacturing, which kicked off on Liberation Day, was cemented with the passage of the big, beautiful bill and has been stuck in a holding pattern ever since, building beneath the surface while missing one crucial element. The objective? The whole point was to unleash a massive wealth transfer away from Wall Street and return it to where it belongs, Main Street. But what happened is the central bank interfered. Powell deliberately projected uncertainty into the markets, driving yields even higher, even after they cut interest rates. They lowered the night rate a few months back, yet the Fed's posture still pushed rates up. Jerome Powell did that intentionally, pressuring Trump to back off and giving his opponents room to push even that new acronym, TACO, that says Trump always chickens out. No, he, along with Scott Bessent, Jameson Greer, Kevin Hassett, and the entire economic team, know what they need, or at least what they believe they need, to make this work. A lot of this sounds highly theoretical, but they won't pursue it unless they believe it can function. And the Fed is central to the plan. So what does Trump need to pull it off? He needs tariffs, a weaker dollar, lower yields, and a dramatically smaller U.S. balance sheet. That's the model. Essentially, the same model China has used for decades. The first two are within Trump's control. Everyone can see what he's doing with tariffs. And the dollar. Just look at what's happened since Trump returned to office. We've been saying for a year that they are intentionally devaluing the dollar. Michael Hartnett wrote in a Buffy research note yesterday, "A weak U.S. dollar policy likely to boost manufacturing in swing states. This is all deliberate strategy." But the last two pieces sit outside Trump's control and outside Bessent's control. The night rate and the U.S. balance sheet are controlled by the Federal Reserve. So to make this happen, he either has to abolish the Fed or install a Fed that shares this vision. And Kevin Worsh's appointment locks that in.
Own no financial assets. They don't have equity in their house. They don't have an account at Schwab. They don't have an account at Coinbase. They're living off their W-2 income. And this surge in prices have destroyed them. Yeah. It's the most regressive tax any government could ever come up with. Imagine if we had a central bank that had been deadly focused on that. I think we wouldn't have taken a divided country and made it more divided. When we have a big balance sheet, we're asking for the inflation that came. And as a final point, my own judgment is the story that I hear from many of my peers. Well, the inflation, well, that's not really the central bank's fault. That's because of Putin and the pandemic. Nonsense. A change in prices happens in a market economy because of shocks in the world. Changes in prices happen every day. That's not what inflation is. Inflation is when that change in prices become embedded. It's second and third order effects. And that's what's been the biggest harm to the country. My recommendation is a smaller balance sheet, takes the Fed back to a more manageable size, a more serious job. And interestingly, if you can have a smaller balance sheet, you can have lower interest rates. Back to you.
He's fully aligned with it. We're sitting on $36 trillion in national debt. Annual interest costs are now over $1 trillion, and the money flowing out of the Fed is being used to liquidate the entire world. This is what they've been waiting for. Kevin Worsh has effectively declared war on the globalist economic model. He's promising an end to excessive money printing and an end to Wall Street bailouts.
it would have been even worse for the rest of the world. So that's what we did in crises. And, some of your and my friends on the right, including at institutions we care deeply about, their views then were you should let the system burn down. A phoenix will rise from the ashes. You really have no business in.
And that's why we've seen such a powerful surge in precious metals over the past year. Gold, silver, copper, all of them. But copper is especially fascinating. It sits at the absolute center of this reshaping of the global economic and political order. This goes far beyond hedging against inflation or dollar debasement like gold and silver. Copper demand is staggering. Supply is disappearing. Chile, the largest copper producer, is seeing production fall. A copper shortage now feels like a matter of time. Prices are hovering near all-time highs. Billionaire investing legend Stanley Duncan. Miller said copper is in the tightest position I have ever studied, and that the deficits ahead are ungodly. Then there's billionaire Robert Freeland, who said that in the next 18 years, we'll have to mine as much copper as we mined over the last 10,000 years, without even factoring in new electrification, data centers, solar, wind, or the broader greening of the world economy. You people have no idea, he says, whatsoever what we're facing. That's again from copper executive and billionaire Robert Freeland. Even billionaire Chamath has called copper his #1 trade for 2026. Watch what he said.
Copper.
Okay. Copper.
We are still completely underestimating how short we are in terms of the global demand-supply dynamics of a handful of critical elements that we need. Again, in the Trump doctrine view of the world, that is no longer as multilateral as it was, and we need to have unilateral national security. And if you look through that lens, the asset that is set up to go absolutely parabolic is copper.
All right, that covers the news segment of this video. Now let me tell you about today's sponsor, because it directly connects to everything we've been discussing. Giant Mining, U.S. ticker BFGF, which is trading near its one-year lows right now, down nearly 70% from its peak. They own the Majuba Hill Copper Project and a past-producing mine in Nevada. The stock is available on Interactive Brokers, Charles Schwab, and others. Since President Trump's inauguration, his administration has aggressively pursued policies aimed at securing U.S. mineral independence, with copper becoming a major flashpoint because it's critical for defense, AI, and infrastructure. In February 2025, President Donald Trump signed Executive Order 14220, launching a Section 232 investigation into U.S. copper imports. The investigation wrapped up in June 2025 and found a significant U.S. trade deficit and overcapacity driven by state-subsidized Chinese copper output, leading to a July presidential proclamation imposing 50% tariffs on semi-finished copper products, including wires and cables, effective August 1, 2025. Trump has repeatedly said there is no rational price for copper when the metal is essential. Effective August 1, 2025, the copper sector, in my view, entered a ground-floor, seismic-scale opportunity, marking a transformative new phase for the entire industry. What we're witnessing is, in my opinion, the earliest chance to be part of a rebirth of American copper mining. We can get access at what looks like its founding moment, and Giant Mining, ticker BFGFF, controls a past-producing copper mine in Nevada, one of America's strongest and most respected mining jurisdictions. Howard Lutnick said, "American industries depend on copper and it should be made in America. No exemptions, no exceptions." Trump said copper should be made in America. It's time for copper to come home. The historic underground mines at the Majuba Hill Project produced copper, tin, and silver from the early 1900s through the 1950s, including 2.8 million pounds of copper, 184,000 ounces of silver, 5,800 ounces of gold, and 21,000 pounds of tin. So I'll say it again. These are the factors behind my strongly bullish view on Giant Mining. The company's infrastructure is already in place. Access roads, power supply, transportation, water supply, or stockpiles, established roads, nearby power, and space for potential processing infrastructure as the project advances, according to company materials. So do your homework on giant mining. Again, ticker BFGFF.